Yes, welcome. It's 11 o'clock. So welcome to this event with Hansa Biopharma to talk about the European commercial rollout. My name is Henrik Ekman and I'm equity analyst here at HC Andersen Capital. And with me today are from Hansa, Pierre-Henri Partin, Vice President of Commercial Operations, and Head of IR, Klaus Sindal. Before I hand over the word, just a few remarks. If you have any questions, please forward in the chat, and I will do my best to bring them to Pierre-Henri. So with that, welcome Pierre-Henri. It's a great pleasure to have you, because I think what we usually hear is the general story and the scientific story about Idefirix, but the commercial rollout. The topic of that is sometimes just a few slides, but now we have the chance to hear this in detail. So it's a great pleasure to have you take us through that. So welcome, and please.
Thank you very much, Henrik, and it's also my pleasure to be here today, and I hope I can give some colors to our commercial activities. This is my objective today. Let's move the slides to this, of course, the statement. And now just a quick introduction for myself. Pierre-Henri Partin. I'm based in Paris, France. I am a medical doctor by training. I've been also graduated from a business and finance degree in Paris. I've been working in pharma for more than 20 years. And the last, I would say, 15 years, I was working in the biotech space. 5 years at Celgene, and more recently, I was 9 years at Vertex International, leading commercial organization across Europe, with a cluster of countries, with big countries like France, Italy, Spain, and even more than that. So I joined Hansa Biopharma almost 2 years ago now, to take care of the commercialization and the launch of Idefirix in Europe. So that's me. The next slide. So today, we are very happy to report that we have achieved some important milestone across the last, I would say, 12 to 15 months. It's a busy slide. Let me just focus on the top of the slides, which are describing the success and I would say the milestone across the commercialization, and more specifically the access element of the commercialization. As you may know, when you get marketing authorization, this is not done. You need to go through all the local requirements, and they are all very different from country to country. They are very different, and they can actually take time to put things in place to get the full, I would say, access reimbursement in a given country. So we started with Sweden. We got marketing authorization and access, of course, in Sweden, and then we had the great opportunity in the Netherlands to be on the market. And then, of course, we continued our work, and we have a team of access people, very, very experienced access people at Hansa. We in the course of 2022, we have secured several larger markets, and this is very important to understand in our commercialization. We secured Germany with a full, I would say, commercialization and conditions with the German payers. And in France, during the springtime, and it was even February, we secured what we call an early access. So we are not completely reimbursed in France, but we found a path to be on the market in France. So today we are on the market in France, and we are funded by the national health system. So this was for us a very important milestone, entering into a large country like France. When you move to the right-hand side of the slide, we have also achieved significant successes in other larger markets. And of course, one of the most difficult markets to enter in Europe, although they are not anymore in Europe, but okay, it's the UK. So we have just before summer, we have announced that NICE granted authorization for us to be available in the UK. Of course, the big market in the UK is England, but there are also other markets like Wales, and Ireland, and then we got also authorization in Scotland. So we have secured access in larger markets during the year, and that was one of our key objectives. Importantly enough, we also have signed a partnership with Medicine. Medicine is an Israeli-based company, but they are becoming very, very active in CE. And we signed the partnership at the beginning of the year, last year. And we have seen some success coming from this partnership. And we have recently announced being fully reimbursed in Poland. And Poland is a large market. This is 40 million people. It's a large market. So this is also something that it's important to highlight today. So you see our journey towards access in several countries here. And I will elaborate a bit further. Next slide. So in a nutshell, where are we operating in? What is our market landscape? So we have received conditional approval in the European Union in 2020, August of 2020. So one has to remember that this is conditional. So to secure the full approval, we need to continue providing data, and we have a post-approval study up and running as we speak. The data were based on 4 clinical phase 2 studies with 46 patients showing very high efficacy for Idefirix, and this was convincing enough for the European Medicines Agency to grant conditional approval. What are we talking about? We are talking about a sub-segment of the overall kidney transplantation market. This segment is around 15% of the overall market. So these patients are highly sensitized. I'm not going to describe the reason why they are highly sensitized, but they are highly sensitized, making them very difficult patients to transplant. This is basically what we are talking about here. Until now, there was no option except to get a very, very, very specific organ, and it's not easy to get. But today they have another option, which is to be transplanted and by using Idefirix. So this is where we are today. Next slide. Some figures to explain also this the market segment that we are in. Worldwide, US and Europe, we're talking about 170,000 people that are on a waiting list. But if you look at the actual transplantation, it is only 50,000. So you can understand that there is an accumulation of patients in waiting list across, I would say, US and Europe. When you deep dive into the segment around these patients, you go to the bottom of the slide, and you can remember that there are basically 3,000 patients in the US and 3,000 patients in Europe that could become eligible to Idefirix. Doesn't mean that we're going to get all these patients, because there are also other criteria, age, comorbidities, and so on and so forth. But this is basically the type of market we are operating in. Next slide. A very important element of this environment is the support from the medical society. And we wanted to highlight today that over the summer, the lead organization looking at organ transplantation in Europe, called ESOT, issued guidelines on desensitizations. So not only they gathered and they issued these guidelines to really define what are these patients, which is actually always the starting point, but they also have highlighted the various options, and of course, one of the key options is nowadays imlifidase, i.e. Idefirix. So this is a very important milestone in our journey, because these markets are heavily driven by guidelines. Next slide. No, thank you. So I gave you a short overview of the market access. It's nice to see it on a map where we are available today. So we have secured access in 9 European countries today. So we have secured this access in, as I said, UK, Germany, France, in the way I just described, early access, in other countries, Sweden, Netherlands, and so on and so forth. But we are still working on 9 countries to get access. And some are actually very, very large markets like Spain and or Italy. We are also working in other Eastern countries. So our journey is not completed in this market access element, but we are on track. We are on track. So next slide. So now the way we see it is that the commercialization of IDFX, we see it, in a schematic way with three phases. The first phase is the phases that we are in today: building the market, getting access in various countries, educating physicians, getting guidelines, all the elements that I try to share. So this is where we are today, very active. We are in very active phase. When it comes to sales, we have reported sales, but it has to be understood that we are still in this very, very early phase where we go center by center and basically patient by patient. So this is where we are today, and I think it's very important to explain that this is the way we see things. We will get to a second phase where we're going to start seeing, I would say, a more sustainable sales and at higher levels. When we will expand internationally with first of all the US, which is a very important market, as we just explained, and then where we're going to see more and more positive experience and more repeated, I would say, transplantation using IDFX. And then we're going to build on this experience and on this accumulation of centers across Europe and of course across the US. And then the third phase is where we're going to get extensions, and we're going to go outside of US and Europe. And there are, of course, opportunities outside of these two big markets, of course, Asia, Australia, and so on and so forth. So this is the way we see things in a schematic way. Next slide. Last but not least, in the last 4 quarters, we have reported sales for IDFX based on the progress that we made with access in these countries. And so you see the data here, and we have reported the latest one is Q3 2022. We were above expectation, I would say. So this is really good. But one has to remember that this is still volatile across time. So we hopefully we can continue growing, but we shall see how the next quarter will look like. But yeah, this is something we are very proud to report today to the community.
Thank you very much, Per-Henri. Very interesting, and it's good to hear that you're very busy entering all these different markets. First of all, on sort of a general note, you mentioned this, that you have been on this journey for 12 to 15 months to get where you are now in terms of entering these markets. What should we expect from here on time-wise in terms of when you are finally through this process? Is that another 12 to 15 months, or somewhere in 23 we could expect that you will be ready to finally launch, or what's the time horizon?
No, that's a fair question. Of course, we are negotiating with governments, with payers, so you never know. This is heavily impacted by the political landscape. I mean, I'm not going to describe, but yes, our objective is to secure the largest market in Europe in the course of 2023. This is our objective. We are on a good path, I would say. We have engaged with Italy. We have engaged with Spain. So we are in active conversation with this large market in Europe.
Yeah, and some of the markets you already have sales, and there's a question from the audience that says, in how many different markets have you had paying patients already?
So this is, that's a good question. That's a fair question. We have had sales in various countries. We do not report into specific countries, but it's not coming from one country. This is a question behind that, but it's coming from more than that, and this is where we have access. Basically, this is where we have access. Well, when we have access, we have, in most cases, sales.
Yeah, but you mentioned in particular, you mentioned the medicine partnership, and has that led to any sales, or is it still? Are they still just working on the market access?
So again, very good question. So we with medicine, we decided to focus and prioritize. I think it's very important to understand that we need to prioritize all the time. We gave the full priority to Poland. Again, this is a 40 million people country. This is the largest market in CE. Very well organized. We understand the landscape very well, and we have been successful. So we do have market access reimbursement in Poland. That was just a few weeks ago that we got the signing of this contract with the Polish government. So today we are in the implementation phase in Poland together with our partner Medicine.
Okay, and you mentioned this. I cannot remember the number. I think it's 9 countries that you already have access, and then
Yes,
there's so for instance, in the middle of next year or during 23, how many more markets from the 9 to what, 12 or 15? Or?
It's always hard to give a number, but yeah, we are very hopeful that we're going to see all the say European 4 plus UK. We do have UK now in our portfolio, I would say. But yes, we are very hopeful that we can achieve reimbursement in Italy, and very hopeful that we could also get reimbursement in Spain. We might also see progresses in other markets. But we're going to see it, case by case, and we will be happy to report when we will have access.
One of the important things is, of course, these guidelines, or at least that you mentioned them as a very important tool. What does that mean? Does that mean that if the different clinics doesn't have guidelines like that, they cannot use Idefirix probably, or what? How should we understand these guidelines?
Okay, so well, to your first question, no, they can use without guidelines in most cases, but the guidelines are very useful for this type of community. It's a small community, kidney transplantation, and they speak a lot, and they work as a community. So they need to align on the way they see things, and it's not only for Idefirix. So it was very positive to see that the leading organization across Europe is now moving towards desensitization and moving towards Idefirix. So this is useful it's not mandatory for the centers, but this is for them very useful tool to get also their education, and they can rely on these guidelines to also decide on their own protocol and guidelines. So it is an important piece, more on the scientific basis than on the access piece. So this is again very useful. And these guidelines have been, as we speak, they are implemented in the way that ESOT is putting efforts to communicate on the guidelines and on educate their members across Europe to understand what it means. So this is more like an educational tool rather than anything else.
And then there is a question from the audience as well. It says, any idea when you will reach phase 3 in this journey? I think in this 3-phase journey, but perhaps, of course, you're still in first phase, and then we have the growth accelerating phase sometime. But can you elaborate on roughly speaking in terms of time when we will enter these different phases?
Of course. So some of the phases are dependent on Europe, others are not. So we're talking years here. If you look at the time, it's more like years. To get to the phase 2, one of the key elements will be to get US approval. So this is also, we have a study to complete FDA requirements in the US, and hopefully we can get back to the table with the FDA. So we're talking about a few years from now to get to phase 3.
Okay. And you mentioned France, and as I understood these wordings of market access, and it was a little bit different. You actually are able to sell, but you don't have the reimbursement and pricing structures in place. Or how should we understand that?
Well, of course, I can understand. This is so specific to France. Actually, this is France is the let me think. Yeah, is the only country that offers this type of opportunity for unmet medical need. It's not for any type of medicine. You need to to be within their criteria of unmet medical needs and having a very innovative medicine. And if you fulfill this criteria, you can be eligible. You can become to what they call early access. This is a new legislation. It's also just to also express that as a company, we were able to understand that there was an opportunity coming from France, and we did everything we could to be ready to submit the application. We were successful. We got the positive green light from the health authorities, So what it gives to what it gives as a benefit is that we are on the market. We can sell in France. Parallel to that, we need to go through the full pricing and reimbursement, and we are doing it as we speak. One key element of France is the HTA. It's an HTA-driven country, and we completed the HTA phase in France with a very positive, I would say, outcome expressed by a number which is called the SMR3. Just for your understanding, only 6% of the medicine they get to this level overall in the French market. So this is where we are. So it is a positive HTA outcome in France. And then parallel to that, the sites are able to order, and they are able to use, and they have been doing it as we speak. So we are in the market in France. We sell.
Okay. And I guess what about UK? What is how big is that market, and what should we expect? Is that different? Are there different guidelines and different systems and structures in terms of reimbursement and stuff that compared to Europe, or is it more or less the same?
Well, I mean, the principles are always the same. You know, there is a kidney center with expert people. They work with an HLA lab. So basically, the setup is very comparable. They have their own organ allocation system in the UK. They are independent in the UK. The system is driven by the British Transplantation Society. It's a very, very important society. So as we said earlier, NICE has given its green light for the use of IDEFIRIX across the kingdom. And the next step is where we are today, which is a commissioning piece. So this is a bit like an administrative piece of the puzzle, where NHS England, because England is the largest market, of course, NHS England is working around the way they're going to implement the use of IDEFIRIX. We are almost there. So we are very hopeful that by early next year, we're going to start. We're going to see use of IDEFIRIX in the UK.
One thing, of course, is getting the formal pricing and reimbursement structures in place. But you have a wording in your presentation that says you need to ensure clinical readiness. What does that mean? Are you educating these clinicals, or what? How should we understand this?
Yeah, no, I think it's an important element. So IDEFIRIX is a breakthrough therapy. It's a very innovative therapy, and it's really setting a new paradigm for the treatment of these highly sensitized patients. So many centers, they couldn't do it. They didn't want to take care of this highly sensitized patients. So they were basically not taking care of this. I mean, not trying even to transplant this. So now they have to revisit their thinking, and we can help them revisiting the thinking. And based on that, they have to also organize themselves to make sure that they're going to be successful. So there are criteria for the use of IDEFIRIX. You need to use it in a certain way. It's not very complicated, but you need to understand. And another very, very important element is the organ allocation, because you use IDEFIRIX when you get an organ, and they also need to organize themselves to make sure that the organ is coming when IDEFIRIX is on site, because everything has to happen more or less on the same time. So there is a bit of logistic around the use of IDEFIRIX, and we can help them, and we are doing it.
Okay. There is a question from the audience. I know you are only responsible for Europe, but still there's these questions. What are the strategy outside Europe, for instance, in terms of Australia, Canada, and so on? So these other major markets.
Yeah, I'm responsible for Europe. I can maybe describe that we are active, that we are seeking, I would say, presence in these countries. But that's basically where we are today. So yes, we do have plans to expand to these countries. Yes.
Okay. Then there is, I guess there are some questions relating to sort of the analyst coverage on specific numbers, earnings and stuff. I know this is not your area in particular of responsibility, but there is a great variance also in how analysts expects the number of patients for IDEFIRIX in the coming years. Where you know these numbers, of course. what would be your own public available expectations to how many patients you will reach, for instance, in 24, which is where I think there are numbers.
I may pass the question to Klaus, who is on the line. Klaus.
Yeah, yeah, but I mean, we don't provide any financial guidance at this point in time. I mean, there's still a lot of variables which needs to happen. I mean, we need to generate market access, etc. before we will have more firm view on the product sales going forward, right? In addition, I think what you need to also consider when looking at analysts is that they have factored in to some extent the milestone payments from some of the partnerships also, which interfere with some of the product sales expectations. But again, end of the day, we cannot guide at this stage.
Okay, thank you. Then, of course, but what it all comes down to is this, Pierre, you already mentioned, which has been communicated many times, the 3,000 in Europe and 3,000 potential patients in US. But the other part, of course, is pricing. And there we have had this pricing of 300,000 euros is the one that is typically talked about. How do you actually come up with that price? What about a lower price?
No, it's
much more, or what sort of the pricing dynamics here?
Yeah, no, it's a fair question. We are operating in the space of orphan medicine, so it's not an uncommon price. Doesn't mean this is why we decided to go for this price, but just to give a bit of perspective around this, where we are operating in. Everything has to be taken in a relative way. I mean, if you understand what we are doing with IDEFIRIX, we are allowing transplantation for patients that otherwise would not be transplanted. And these patients are under dialysis. This is what this is their present and future. And there's a cost around dialysis. And not only there is a huge cost on quality of life and even survival, which I'm not going to describe, but there is a huge cost for these people. They cannot live normal lives. I mean, this is very well documented. But just to give a bit of perspective around the 300,000 that you described, the cost of dialysis, depending on the country, is between 50,000 to 90,000 euro for 1 year. So if you think about a patient of whatever 30 years, this patient will continue dialysis for the next, who knows, 20, 30 years. So there is a cost also by not using IDEFIRIX, if you allow me. And to the level that we managed to convince payers that this is a very good investment. In most, depending on the system, but in most cases, we are cost effective, which is very, very unique for an orphan medicine. Very, very unique. Even in some countries, we are seen as cost saving. And again, this is not something you see very often in the orphan medicine space. So this is the right price for this medicine.
Yeah, and of course as there's pressure on cost in the health area generally, that of course is the cost saving aspect is of course very important. But how important is the concept as you propose these different clinics? How important is the possibility to people not being on dialysis, but actually, how important is that, or is it just a matter of saving, making a good cost reduction offer?
No, the main driver is not so much on the cost for a physician. I'm a physician. It's really to help the patients. Again, being on dialysis is this is what they have to do. But it's I mean, the quality of life is completely destroyed. I mean, you being on dialysis means sometimes dialysis every day. So you have to go. I mean, it's a very, very tough, I would say, life. So by doing transplantation, you are actually offering really new life. So this is the driver of the centers. They want to help their patients as much as they can. But for highly sensitized patients, they can't, because these patients they are not fit for transplantation, except if you find a way for them to be desensitized, where IDEFIRIX come in place.
Okay. I think we are more or less running out of time. So Pierre-Henri Patin, a very warm thanks to you for participating in this event. It's been very interesting to hear a detailed view of this that we often not talk about. So I think it's It's been very relevant to hear that it's how complicated it is. And also thank you to Claus Sindal for participating from Hansa Biopharma. And as always, we will share this presentation so you can look at it again or the first time on various social media platforms. So with that, thank you very much, and thank you to the audience.